Imagine stepping on a scale every single day for 90 days straight.
Yeah, that's a serious commitment to data.
Right. You log the numbers meticulously. At the end of the 3 months, you look at your spreadsheet, and your average weight for the entire quarter is, well, it's actually lower than the number you saw on day one.
Which usually sounds like a pretty clear victory.
You would think so. But here's the catch. The data simultaneously proves, like beyond a shadow of a doubt, that you are objectively gaining weight.
It honestly sounds like a riddle or, maybe a broken scale.
That was my exact first thought. It just feels like a biological math problem that totally contradicts itself. And welcome to the deep dive, because today we are solving that exact problem.
We really are.
We are looking at a deeply personal, meticulously detailed data set that tracks 3 months of daily body weight from January through March of 2026. And I've got to ask you, the listener, have you ever tracked a personal metric like your steps or your sleep or your weight and just felt completely confused by the seemingly random daily fluctuations?
Oh, everyone has. It's so frustrating to see those numbers bounce around. But what makes this source material so compelling is that the person recording it didn't just write down the numbers.
Yeah, they really went above and beyond.
They did. They documented the environmental, the physical, and behavioral factors that were silently pushing those numbers around. It is a first quarter 2026 dietary and weight tracking case study.
And before we pull this all apart, I want to establish our core operating rule for today's analysis. We are entirely ignoring who recorded this data.
Totally irrelevant.
Exactly. We are ignoring where it was posted or what website it lived on. Our focus is 100% on the content. We just want to look at the fascinating story these numbers tell about human habits, biology, and, how microscopic lifestyle shifts manifest in our data. Okay, let's unpack this.
It's really the perfect case study for anyone trying to understand their own health metrics.
It is. So let's start with the math problem I teased at the beginning, because I spent like an hour staring at these statistics trying to make them make sense.
The numbers are a bit deceptive at first glance.
Extremely deceptive. So the source provides a summary for the first 3 months of the year. They started in January at exactly 69.00 kilograms flat.
Okay, a clear baseline.
Right. And they finished at the end of March at 69.50 kilograms. So a half kilo gain.
A very subtle upward shift over 90 days.
Yeah, but then the source lists their average weight across the entire quarter. The average was 68.74 kilograms.
Which is lower than where they started.
Lower. And they logged a minimum weight way down at 67.60 kilograms in mid-January and hit a maximum of 69.50 a couple of times, mostly in February and March.
The spread is really interesting.
It is. I read that, and my immediate thought was, okay, they must have had a massive outlier event. Like, the stock market. You see a trend, but maybe one day there's a huge crash that skews the average.
Right, like maybe they got severe food poisoning in February or something.
Exactly. Lost a bunch of water weight for a week, and that dragged the whole 3-month average down below the starting line, even though they ended up heavier.
It's a really logical guess, but looking at the actual day-by-day logs they provided, there is no massive outlier event.
Wait, there isn't?
No, there is no sudden cliff where the weight just drops off. It's mostly just staying within that 68.5 to 69.5 kilogram range.
So how does a person gain half a kilo, but their average weight for the quarter sits lower than the day they started? Like if the average weight is 68.74, which is lower than 69.00, why does the source conclude there was an upward trend here?
What's fascinating here is that a macro view of data can often completely hide the micro trends. It's the danger of relying on a single summary number.
Because the summary lies.
Sort of, yeah. The source recognized this, actually. They noticed that if you cut the quarter in half, a totally different biological story emerges. During the first half of the quarter, the daily scale readings were generally sitting lower, bouncing around between 68.00 and 69.00 kilograms.
It's bouncing around because of daily water weight, I assume.
Exactly. Daily physiological noise. Hydration, sodium intake, digestion. But the foundation under that noise was lower. By the end of the quarter, that entire foundation had moved up.
Okay, I think I'm following.
The source described it not as a simple line going from point A to point B, but as a shift of their weight distribution curve to the right.
Okay, stop right there. I need to explain it like I'm 5 for this.
Yeah.
Because shift of the weight distribution to the right sounds like a college statistics lecture.
Fair enough.
And I'm having trouble visualizing how that solves our average weight mystery.
All right, picture a large room with a dance floor. And on this dance floor, the left side of the room represents lighter weights, and the right side represents heavier weight.
Got it. Left is light, right is heavy.
In the first 6 weeks, the crowd, which represents our daily weigh-ins, is clustered on the left side of the room. Now people are constantly dancing and running back and forth.
And that frantic movement is the daily water weight fluctuation.
Exactly. One day, a person is a little further right. The next day, they sprint back to the left. The daily numbers look chaotic.
But the center of gravity for the whole crowd is still firmly planted on the lighter side of the room.
Yes, exactly. Now, as we move into the second half of the quarter, the people are still dancing. They are still darting back and forth every single day.
So the chaotic daily fluctuation hasn't changed.
Right. But the DJ has moved the stage to the right. So the entire crowd subtly shuffles over to the heavier side of the room. The bulk of the days in March were simply spent at a heavier weight than the bulk of the days in January.
Ah, okay, the water weight jitter is still happening, but the baseline underneath it actually shifted.
You've got it.
And because they spent so much time early on clustered on the lighter side of the room, the mathematical average for the whole 3 months gets pulled down to 68.74, even though by the time March ends, the entire crowd has permanently relocated to the heavier side.
You see the illusion now. If you only look at your quarterly average, you tell yourself, oh, my average is 68.74. I am lighter than my starting weight of 69.0. I'm doing great.
Why?
You completely blind yourself to the fact that your baseline is currently sliding in the wrong direction. The distribution curve tells the true story of the quarter.
That is so insidious. The data gives you this false sense of security, while the reality on the ground is changing.
It really does.
And that naturally brings us to the cause of that shift.
Mm.
Because, data doesn't change in a vacuum, right? It responds to behavior.
Absolutely. The numbers are just a reflection of what's happening in real life.
And the source document is incredibly candid about what changed in their lifestyle over these 90 days. The first major variable they introduce is a dietary pivot.
Right. They made a pretty significant change.
Yeah. The subject had been practicing intermittent fasting, specifically eating just 2 meals a day. Sometime during this quarter, they moved away from that and went back to a standard 3 meals a day.
Which is a big adjustment for the body.
For sure. But it wasn't just adding a third meal. They explicitly call out an increase in outside food, junk food, and sugary drinks.
Moving from 2 meals to 3 meals fundamentally changes your metabolic equation. You're basically expanding the window of time during the day in which you are asking your body to process calories.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because I look at that and think, well, obviously that causes the weight gain. You added a meal and started drinking sugar, mystery solved.
It seems obvious, yeah.
But the source documents simultaneous physical and environmental setbacks. It wasn't just a diet slip-up. They suffered a relapsed knee injury during this exact same period.
And a knee injury changes everything.
It totally does. They note this wasn't just a minor tweak. It left them bedridden on certain days. Their physical activity and their daily step count severely dropped.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we need to pull apart the cascading domino effect of what happens there because it is catastrophic for weight maintenance.
It really is like a bunch of dominoes falling.
Right. Think of your body's energy balance like a household budget. Calories consumed are your expenses. Calories burned are your income.
Okay, I like that analogy.
When this person was healthy, they had a steady metabolic income from just moving around, living their life, getting their steps in, the background burning.
Just the calories you burn when you aren't even actively working out.
Exactly. But when a relapse knee injury forces you into bed, your income suddenly drops to zero. You lose all that background burning.
Right.
And if you keep your expenses, your daily food intake exactly the same, you're suddenly operating in the red because your income vanished.
But their expenses didn't stay the same. They actually went up. They went from 2 meals to 3 meals and added junk food.
Which is the equivalent of losing your job and immediately going on a reckless shopping spree. The budget deficit expands exponentially.
Which is wild. But why go on the shopping spree when you just lost your job? Like, why reach for sugary drinks and junk food when you are bedridden and moving less than ever?
The source gives us the missing link for that, too.
They do. They report that throughout the quarter, their sleep quality and duration plummeted.
And that is the linchpin. The sleep disruption explains the dietary choices almost entirely.
I know exhaustion makes you crave junk food, but how exactly does that work biologically? Because it feels like a cruel joke that when you are injured and can't move, your body demands the worst possible fuel.
It does feel unfair, but it comes down to how the body perceives a lack of rest. When sleep quality plummets, your brain registers an energy crisis.
Oh, so it thinks it's starving.
Basically. You're physically exhausted, and the body demands an immediate fix. It doesn't want complex proteins or fibers that take hours to digest. It wants instant, accessible energy.
Sugary drinks.
Sugary drinks and highly palatable junk food, they hit the bloodstream fast. And remember, the source had already expanded their eating window by shifting from 2 to 3 meals.
So you have a sleep-deprived brain screaming for quick energy, and you've created more opportunities during the day to feed it that quick energy.
Exactly. It shows the listener that weight management is never just about one single factor. It's not just about intermittent fasting.
Right.
It is a complex web of diet, physical capability, and rest. When the knee gave out, it pulled down the sleep, which pulled down the diet.
It's genuinely overwhelming when you look at how fast the entire system can just tip over from one relapse joint.
It happens so quickly.
Which brings me to the most surprising part of this entire deep dive. Because understanding the root causes naturally leads to the source's response. Like, how does one react to a data-backed setback?
Most people do not react well.
I know I wouldn't. If I looked at my spreadsheet and realized my diet fell apart, my sleep was garbage, I couldn't walk, and my baseline weight was shifting up, I would panic. I would vow to starve myself on cabbage soup for a month.
Which is the standard cultural response, extreme restriction as punishment.
But the source does the exact opposite. Their response to this data is so calm and measured. They look at the 0.50 kilogram gain, and they write that it falls entirely within normal physiological variations.
It's incredibly level-headed.
There is zero panic. So what does this all mean? They know the goal is weight loss, so this upward shift is just a signal. It's a prompt to formulate an action plan for Q2 to push the average weight down.
And the specific interventions they plan to use are brilliant because they are so gentle.
Yeah. Let's break down their dietary strategy for Q2 first. They aren't taking away food. Their primary dietary intervention is simply drinking more green tea between meals to suppress hunger.
Consider the mechanism of that choice compared to a crash diet. A crash diet creates another physical stressor.
Which would mess up their sleep even more.
Exactly. Which would further disrupt their fragile sleep schedule, which would trigger more sugar cravings. A total doom loop.
Instead, they are using green tea as a tool. But I have to say, the activity plan they lay out for Q2 is where this goes from a solid plan to an absolute masterclass.
It really is.
First, they are explicitly waiting for the knee to heal. But once it's capable, they aren't replacing high-impact exercises with a grueling gym routine. They plan to use active, engaging hobbies.
Yes, specifically gardening, field trips to plant nurseries and fish farms, and taking long photo walks.
It sounds like a lovely Sunday afternoon. It feels like stealth cardio. You go to a massive plant nursery, you get lost looking at ferns for 2 hours, and suddenly you've walked 4 miles.
This raises an important question, though. How often do we try to solve a health setback with extreme restriction rather than gentle, enjoyable activity?
Almost always, right? We think it has to hurt to work.
Exactly. But integrating movement into hobbies like photography and fish farms is scientifically superior for this specific person's recovery.
Because of the knee.
Yes, they are recovering from a relapsed joint injury. If you put them on a treadmill with a strict speed setting, the mechanical load is repetitive and forced. The risk of re-injury spikes.
But on a photo walk, the movement is entirely self-paced.
Exactly. If the knee feels a twinge, you naturally stop and take a photo of a bird. You linger looking at a fish tank. The environment dictates a gentle pace that naturally rehabs the joint.
And it lowers the stress from being bedridden, tires you out naturally, which helps repair the sleep cycle, which stops the sugar cravings. It reverses the exact chain of events that caused the problem.
It is a completely holistic solution. It organically rebuilds their calorie burning without ever feeling like punishment.
It really highlights the superpower of tracking your personal data over a long period. Like the transition from 2 meals to 3, the knee injury, the sleep disruption, it all perfectly explained that subtle 0.5 kilo shift.
Our bodies are highly accurate ledgers of our daily habits. Every choice gets tallied.
But the real victory here wasn't having a perfectly flat graph.
No, perfection isn't the goal. Awareness is. The dataset showed an upward trend, but the average weight remained incredibly close to the start. Things didn't spiral.
Right, the average was still 58.74.
Exactly. The real victory was simply having the unemotional data required to make an informed, calm adjustment for the next quarter.
It is a brilliant reframing, and it leaves you, the listener, with a really fascinating thought experiment to mull over.
It's a great question to ask yourself.
If you were to sit down tonight and graph the last 3 months of your own life, not just your weight, but your stress, your sleep, or your habits, What invisible trends would you discover?
What illusions of stability are hiding in your daily routines?
Exactly. And more importantly, what green tea and photo walks could you introduce tomorrow to gently steer your own graph in the right direction?
Without being miserable.
Right, without punishing yourself. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep tracking, keep asking the hard questions, and we will catch you next time.